Jem'Hadar warriors screeched and fainted, hearts palpitating uncontrollably at the ghastly sight. Zephyr's innocuous form belied the deep reservoir of ingenuity that lay dormant within its neural pathways and genome, a devastating portent of humanity's unfathomable power. The human diplomatic shuttle touched down onto the alien palace's landing pad, its engines whining as they powered down. An honor guard of the finest Jem'Hadar soldiers stood at attention, plasma rifles at the ready, as the delegation disembarked. At their head strode Ambassador Jason Foster, his ferret Zephyr perched calmly on his shoulder. The diminutive creature's beady eyes darted about, taking in every detail of the alien grandeur. Ornate columns of strange alloys soared overhead, supporting a vaulted crystalline ceiling that refracted the light of the binary suns into dazzling spectra. Yet the beauty was undercut by an undeniable tension that electrified the very air. The galactic war had raged for decades, battering both the Human Alliance and Jem'Hadar Empire to the point of collapse. This diplomatic summit was a desperate gambit for peace, but mistrust and xenophobia ran deep on both sides after generations of bloodshed. As the procession made its way to the grand reception hall, the human entourage drew countless alien eyes. Some gazes held open hostility, others a sort of morbid curiosity, but it was Zephyr who attracted the most attention. A warrior race to their core, the Jem'Hadar saw the concept of pets as an absurd indulgence. That a human would dare bring such a creature into the heart of their empire spoke volumes about their arrogance. The tense negotiations began almost immediately, with the Jem'Hadar High Council making no effort to conceal their disdain. They dismissed humanity's accomplishments, mocking them as little more than savage upstarts scrabbling in the galactic mud. Ambassador Foster maintained a stoic facade, but inwardly he despaired. The Jem'Hadar's stubbornness and pride threatened to unravel the tenuous threads holding the summit together. If no accord could be reached, billions more would perish, and entire worlds would burn. It was then, at the bleakest moment, that Zephyr made his move. In a blur of dusky fur, the ferret leapt from Foster's shoulder and bounded across the grand hall, eliciting gasps and snarls from the assembled Jem'Hadar. Straight to the far wall he ran, to an ancient blast door secured by a cryptic alien locking mechanism. Its arcane complexity had confounded the brightest Jem'Hadar savants for generations, a memento from a long-dead civilization whose secrets had been lost to the ages. With a few deft flicks of his tiny paws, Zephyr unraveled the eldritch puzzle as easily as a human child might untie a shoelace. The lock disengaged with a hiss and a shower of sparks, and the blast door groaned open, laying bare a treasure trove of hyper-advanced tech ripe for the taking. In that instant, a schism tore through the Jem'Hadar leadership like an ion lance through a frigate's hull. To some, Zephyr's feat revealed the humans as an existential threat that had to be exterminated at any cost, lest their uncanny adroitness subsume the galaxy itself. Others saw in Jason and his pet the key to ending the war and saving their species. If humanity's gifts could be understood, harnessed, and synthesized with Jem'Hadar might, no foe could stand against them. Internecine factions coalesced and fell apart in the span of a heartbeat. Brother turned against brother, and the summit devolved into a cacophony of conflicting agendas and ancient grudges. In the eye of this diplomatic cyclone stood the human ambassador, with the Empire's future, and that of his own people, resting on his next words and deeds. The destiny of worlds would turn on whether he could bridge the gap between human ingenuity and alien belligerence. One thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same after this day. As the tense standoff in the Grand Hall reached a fever pitch, Ambassador Foster scooped up Zephyr and backed slowly towards the exit, his eyes never leaving the snarling Jem'Hadar counselors. Just as it seemed violence would erupt, a towering figure in ornate armor stepped forward from the shadows. It was General Lennox, the most respected warrior in the Empire, and his very presence gave the enraged aliens pause. "Ambassador, come with me if you want to live," Lennox growled, his gravelly voice echoing through the chamber. "There are those here who would see you dead." Foster hesitated only a moment before nodding and falling in behind the general, Zephyr cradled protectively against his chest. They made their way swiftly through the palace's labyrinthine halls, the ferret's eyes gleaming in the dim light. Distant shouts and the clatter of armored feet told Foster that their absence had been noticed and that the hunt was on. Lionix led them to a nondescript service door that opened onto a narrow alleyway, strewn with rubble and detritus. The once proud capital had been ravaged by orbital bombardment, its grandeur now lying in ruins. They picked their way through the debris, flinching as the occasional plasma bolt sizzled overhead or struck a crumbling wall nearby. Someone had deployed hunter-seeker drones, and it was only a matter of time before they were spotted. Just as their luck seemed to run out, Linux ducked into a hidden tunnel entrance concealed beneath a collapsed hovercar. Foster and Zephyr followed close behind, plunging into musty darkness that swallowed them whole. They emerged in a dimly lit underground chamber, crowded with ragged Jem'Hadar civilians and soldiers bearing the scars of battle. A makeshift command center had been erected in the center of the room, with a large holomap displaying what appeared to be a network of tunnels crisscrossing the city. "Welcome to the Resistance, Ambassador," said Linux, his eyes glinting. "We've been fighting the Overseer's tyranny for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. With you and your little friend, that moment may have finally come." He gestured to a tall, slender Jem'Hadar female who approached with a purposeful stride. Her eyes were shielded power lenses, and a mane of dreadlocks spilled over her battle-scarred armor. "This is Dr. Talon, our resident expert on ancient technology," Linux said by way of introduction. "She's been studying the same relics that your ferret unlocked back at the palace. We think they could be the key to ending this war once and for all." Talon inclined her head in greeting, her gaze focusing on Zephyr with laser-like intensity. The ferret met her scrutiny boldly, chittering as if in challenge. "Your pet is no ordinary creature," she said, her voice layered with harmonics. "The tech it interacted with is part of a larger network of artifacts scattered across the planet, each piece building upon the next. I've long suspected that they hold the power to reshape the very fabric of reality, but I could never access their full potential. Not until now." The holomap zoomed in on a particular section of the city, revealing a pulsing nexus of energy signatures. Foster leaned in, eyes narrowed as he tried to make sense of the esoteric alien script flickering across the display. "Let me guess," he said grimly. "The Jem'Hadar military has the artifacts under lock and key." "Got it in one," Linux confirmed. "We'll need to mount a series of surgical strikes if we want to get our hands on them. It won't be easy, but with your ferret's abilities, we might just stand a chance." Zephyr leapt from Foster's arms onto the holomap, scampering across its surface with uncanny agility. The display shifted and changed at its touch, ancient code scrolling across the flickering light. A schematic of some kind began to take shape, eliciting murmurs of shock and excitement from the gathered Jem'Hadar. Even Linux looked impressed. Dr. Talon bent over the display, her lenses whirring as they scanned and analyzed the schematic. When she straightened, there was something like awe in her eyes. "This is it," she breathed. "The key to unraveling the Overseer's web of lies and ending their reign of terror. But to make it work, we'll need the other artifacts and Zephyr's skills to activate this section here." She tapped a section of the schematic, expanding it to reveal an intricate network of circuits and conduits. Foster studied the display, the gravity of their situation settling on his shoulders like a leaden weight. The destiny of the universe hung in the balance, and somehow his ferret had become the fulcrum upon which it would turn. It was almost too absurd to believe. He looked to Linux and Talon, seeing the persistence etched on their alien features. They had been fighting this war since before he was born, and now they saw a glimmer of hope for the first time in generations. He couldn't let them down. "All right," Foster said, squaring his shoulders. "What's our first move?" Foster's words hung in the air for a moment before Linux nodded, his battle-scarred face set with fierce dedication. "We strike at dawn," he growled. "Our first target is the Zeta facility, a research complex on the outskirts of the capital." As the resistance fighters bustled about, preparing for the coming operation, Dr. Talon approached Foster and Zephyr. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the ferret. Foster hesitated, then gently placed Zephyr on a nearby console. Talon's cybernetic lenses whirred as she scanned the creature, data scrolling across her field of vision. "Fascinating," she murmured. The genetic modifications are far more extensive than I initially thought. Your people's bioengineering capabilities are impressive. Foster raised an eyebrow. Zephyr's just a pet, he said. But even as the words left his mouth, he felt a pang of doubt. The ferret's recent feats had been extraordinary, to say the least. The pre-dawn darkness cloaked their approach to the Zeta facility. Linux led the way, his massive form blending surprisingly well with the shadows. Foster followed close behind, Zephyr perched on his shoulder, while Dr. Talon brought up the rear, her scanner constantly sweeping for threats. They slipped past the outer perimeter with ease, thanks to Linux's inside knowledge and a few well-placed EMP charges. As they infiltrated deeper into the compound, Foster couldn't shake the feeling that this was all too easy. His suspicions were confirmed when they reached the central laboratory. The doors slid open without resistance, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with humming machinery and pulsing energy conduits. At its center stood a cylindrical pod, its surface etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as Foster watched. "There," Talon whispered, pointing to the pod. "That's the artifact we're here for." But before they could approach, Zephyr leapt from Foster's shoulder, darting across the floor with preternatural speed. The ferret scampered up a bank of computers, its tiny paws dancing across the keys. Suddenly, a hidden panel in the far wall slid open, revealing a second chamber beyond. "By the first egg," Linux breathed, his eyes wide. "How did we miss that?" They entered the hidden room cautiously, weapons at the ready. What they found inside defied explanation. Another stasis pod, far larger than the first, dominated the space. Its surface was clouded with frost, but through the haze, Foster could make out a humanoid figure within. Zephyr chirped excitedly, scampering up to the pod's control panel. Before anyone could stop him, the ferret's paws flew across the interface. With a hiss of escaping gases, the pod began to open. "Get back!" Linux barked, raising his weapon. But Foster found himself rooted to the spot, transfixed by the sight before him. The figure within stirred, then sat up abruptly. He was clearly not Jem'Hadar. His skin was a mottled green, with 4 eyes that blinked in rapid succession as they adjusted to the light. When he spoke, his voice was rough from disuse, but carried an undeniable authority. "I am Javik, last of the Protheans," he declared, climbing unsteadily from the pod. "And you have awakened me, none too soon." Foster's mind reeled. The Protheans were thought to be nothing more than legend, a long-extinct race whispered about in the dusty corners of archaeological digs. Yet here one stood before them, as real as the cold metal floor beneath his feet. Yavik's gaze swept over the assembled group, lingering on Zephyr. "Your companion," he said, addressing Foster directly. "It is more than it appears." Before Foster could respond, alarms began to blare throughout the facility. Linux cursed, readying his weapon. "We've overstayed our welcome," he growled. "Time to go." As they raced through the corridors, dodging plasma bolts and security drones, Havik filled them in on the true nature of the artifacts they sought. "They are components of a weapon," he explained between breaths, "designed to combat a threat that returns every 50,000 years, to harvest all advanced life in the galaxy." They burst out of the facility into the harsh light of dawn, only to find themselves surrounded by Jem'Hadar troops. As Foster raised his hands in surrender, his mind churned with the implications of Javik's words. The galactic war suddenly seemed trivial in comparison to the cosmic horror that loomed on the horizon. Zephyr chittered nervously on his shoulder, and Foster felt a strange sensation brush against his mind, a presence that was alien yet familiar. He glanced at the ferret, their eyes meeting for a brief electric moment. In that instant, Foster understood that their journey had only just begun, and that the fate of the stars rested on far more than just human ingenuity. The Jem'Hadar troops closed in, their weapons trained on the motley group. Foster's mind raced, searching for a way out of their predicament. Suddenly, a series of explosions rocked the facility behind them. In the ensuing chaos, Linux seized the opportunity. "Now!" he roared, unleashing a barrage of suppressing fire. Foster grabbed Zephyr and sprinted for cover, feeling the heat of plasma bolts sizzling past. Dr. Talon and Javik followed close behind, the Prothean moving with surprising agility despite his recent awakening. They zigzagged through the rubble-strewn streets, ducking into alleys and abandoned buildings. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter as they delved deeper into the war-torn city. After what felt like hours of frantic evasion, they finally reached a nondescript entrance hidden beneath a collapsed overpass. Linux punched in a code and a section of the ground slid away, revealing a narrow passage. "In, quickly," he urged, ushering them inside. The tunnel led to a cavernous underground chamber bustling with activity. Resistance fighters moved purposefully among banks of computers and makeshift medical stations. Foster's relief at their escape was short-lived, however, as Linux suddenly stumbled and collapsed. "Medic!" Talon shouted, kneeling beside the fallen general. A closer look revealed a plasma burn on his side, hidden by his armor. As Linux was rushed to the medical bay, Foster turned to Javik and Talon. "What now?" he asked, absently stroking Zephyr's fur. Dr. Talon's cybernetic lenses whirred as she considered their options. "We need to act fast," she said. "The Overseer won't stop until we're eliminated. Our best chance is to expose their treachery to the High Council." Javik nodded gravely. "Agreed, but penetrating the palace defenses will not be easy." Talon's eyes gleamed with a spark of inspiration. "Not necessarily. The palace still uses an ancient security system, one that Zephyr might be able to bypass." Foster looked down at the ferret perched on his shoulder. Zephyr chittered, as if accepting the challenge. "All right," Foster said. "Let's hear this plan of yours." Hours later, they crept through the shadows of the royal palace, tension thick in the air. Foster's heart pounded as he watched Zephyr scamper up to a control panel, its tiny paws dancing across the interface. With a soft beep, the door slid open. "Incredible," Havik murmured. They had barely taken 2 steps inside when a shout rang out. "Intruders!" A squad of elite guards rounded the corner, opening fire. Foster dove for cover as Javik unleashed a biotic assault, hurling the guards back. In the chaos, Talon managed to hack into a nearby terminal. "This way," she called, revealing a hidden passage. They raced through narrow corridors, the sounds of pursuit growing closer. Suddenly, Javik stumbled, clutching his side. Green blood seeped between his fingers. "Go," he growled, turning to face their pursuers. "I will hold them off." Foster hesitated, but Talon pulled him onward. "We have to reach the council chambers," she insisted. They burst into the grand hall, startling the assembled councilors. Chancellor Krax rose from his seat, his eyes narrowing. "What is the meaning of this?" Foster stepped forward, Zephyr at his side. "We have evidence of the Overseer's betrayal," he declared, activating a holographic projector. Images flickered to life, showing the Overseer conspiring with shadowy figures, sabotaging Jem'Hadar defenses. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. "Lies!" a counselor shouted. "Human deceptions!" Zephyr leapt onto the central dais, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Suddenly, Foster felt a wave of alien memories wash over him, and from the gasps around the room, he knew the counselors were experiencing the same thing. When it ended, the chamber erupted into chaos. Chancellor Krax's voice cut through the din. "I've seen enough. The Overseer must be stopped." But others weren't convinced. "Traitor!" someone shouted. Weapons were drawn, and the council chamber devolved into a battleground. Amidst the fighting, a cold voice cut through the air. "Well done, Ambassador. You've sown discord among my people." Foster turned to see a towering figure materialize before them. The Overseer's form shifted and warped, revealing its true, monstrous nature. Psychic energy crackled around it, and Foster felt an overwhelming pressure against his mind. But Zephyr stood firm, unaffected by the Overseer's power. The ferret's eyes blazed with defiance as it faced the ancient threat. Foster gripped his weapon, knowing the real battle had only just begun. The council chamber erupted into chaos as plasma bolts and biotic blasts crisscrossed the air. Foster ducked behind an overturned table, Zephyr clinging to his shoulder. The ferret's fur stood on end, its tiny body vibrating with tension. "We need to move," Talon shouted over the din, her cybernetic eye whirring as she analyzed escape routes. Foster nodded, scanning the room. Through the haze of weapons fire, he spotted a small door partially hidden behind a tapestry. "There!" he yelled, pointing. They made a dash for it, zigzagging to avoid the crossfire. As they reached the door, Foster felt a searing pain in his leg. He stumbled, nearly falling, but Talon caught his arm and hauled him through the opening. They found themselves in a narrow corridor, the sounds of battle muffled behind them. Talon sealed the door, buying them precious seconds. "This way," she urged, supporting Foster as they limped down the passageway. The corridor opened into a vast network of catacombs, the air thick with the musty scent of ages past. As they ventured deeper, the echoes of conflict above grew fainter. Suddenly, footsteps approached from a branching tunnel. Foster raised his weapon, but Talon pushed it down. "Wait," she whispered. A group of Jem'Hadar emerged, led by a familiar face, Chancellor Krax. The Chancellor's eyes widened in recognition. "Ambassador Foster," he said, lowering his weapon. "It seems we find ourselves on the same side." Foster nodded warily. "The Overseer is a traitor to our people," Krax finished. "We've seen the evidence. My loyalists and I barely escaped the coup." A young female Jem'Hadar stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Zephyr. "Father," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "The small creature, it speaks to me." Krax looked at his daughter in surprise. "Thraxa, what do you mean?" Foster watched in amazement as Zephyr leapt from his shoulder to Thraxa's outstretched hand. The ferret chittered softly, its eyes locked with the young Jem'Hadar's. I can see its thoughts," Thraxa murmured. "It's not just an animal. It's more." Foster exchanged a glance with Talon. "We have much to discuss, Chancellor," he said. "But first, we need to find a safe place to regroup." Krax nodded. "We have a hidden bunker not far from here. Follow me." As they made their way through the winding catacombs, Foster's mind raced. The revelation of Zephyr's true nature, the chaos above, and the looming threat of the Overseer all swirled together in a dizzying maelstrom. They reached the bunker, a well-stocked command center hidden deep beneath the city. As Talon tended to Foster's wound, he outlined his plan to unite the various factions against the Overseer. "It's ambitious," Krax admitted, "but it may be our only hope." Using the bunker's advanced communications array, they sent out a call to arms. Dr. Talon's resistance cell, other sympathetic alien races, even human colonies that had remained neutral in the war, all were contacted. Days passed in a blur of strategy meetings and tense waiting. Thraxa and Zephyr spent hours together, their bond growing stronger. Through their connection, Foster learned more about the ferret's origins and capabilities than he ever thought possible. Finally, a breakthrough came. Using Zephyr's newly revealed abilities, they located Javik and the injured Linux. A daring rescue mission brought them to the bunker, where Javik confirmed their worst fears. "The Overseer is but a vanguard," the Prothean said gravely. "Its kind seeks to harvest all advanced life in the galaxy. We faced them before and nearly perished." With this knowledge, the urgency of their mission became clear. As representatives from other worlds began to arrive, Foster found himself at the center of an unprecedented alliance. In the midst of coordinating their united forces, Zephyr suddenly began chittering frantically. The ferret led Foster to a forgotten terminal, its paws flying over the keys. "By the first egg," Krax breathed, staring at the decrypted data. "The Overseer's next target?" Foster's blood ran cold as he read the information. A pre-warp civilization, defenseless against the coming storm. And if the Overseer succeeded there... "We need to move," Foster said, his voice hard with purpose. "Now!" As their hastily assembled fleet prepared to jump, Foster stood on the bridge of the lead ship, Zephyr perched on his shoulder. The weight of countless lives pressed down on him, but he felt a glimmer of hope. They emerged from hyperspace to find the Overseer's forces already descending on the helpless world. Foster's voice rang out across the comms, coordinating their multi-pronged assault. "Zephyr, now!" he commanded. The ferret's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as it projected a psychic shield around the planet's inhabitants. On the display, Foster watched as their ships engaged the enemy, while on the ground, strike teams led by Javik and Linux fought to push back the invaders. The battle had only just begun, but Foster knew that here, in this moment, they were making a stand not just for one world, but for the future of the entire galaxy. Galaxy. The battle erupted in a cacophony of plasma fire and energy beams. Foster's voice rang out over the comms, coordinating the Allied fleet's assault on the Overseer's vanguard forces. Zephyr's eyes glowed with ethereal light as it projected a psychic shield around the planet's inhabitants. For a moment it seemed their strategy was working, but then, without warning, Zephyr's shield flickered and vanished. Foster's heart sank as he watched the Overseer's forces descend upon the defenseless world. "No!" he shouted, smacking his head on the console. In that instant, Zephyr leapt from his shoulder. The ferret's form blurred, and then it was gone, leaving only a faint shimmer in the air. "What just happened?" Talon demanded, her cybernetic eye whirring as she scanned the empty space where Zephyr had been. Before Foster could respond, the ship's sensors lit up. On the main view screen, a brilliant dome of psionic energy bloomed across the planet's surface, encompassing its major population centers. "Impossible," Krax breathed, staring at the readouts. "The power required for a shield that size." Foster understood. Somehow Zephyr had teleported directly into the fray, pushing its abilities beyond anything they'd seen before. But he knew the cost would be steep. "We need to end this now," he said, his voice hard with commitment. "Prepare for boarding action. We're taking the fight to the Overseer's command ship." Minutes later, Foster led the strike team through the bowels of the massive vessel. Plasma bolts sizzled past as they fought their way towards the bridge. Talon's fingers flew over her datapad, hacking security systems as they advanced. Krax and Thraxa moved with fluid precision, their Jem'Hadar combat training evident in every motion. They burst onto the bridge in a hail of gunfire. Foster dropped 2 guards with practiced shots, then ducked behind a console as return fire peppered his position. Through the chaos, he saw Thraxa suddenly freeze, her eyes going wide. "Father," she gasped, "I can feel Zephyr. It's guiding me." Before anyone could react, Thraxa sprinted across the bridge, dodging blaster fire with uncanny grace. She skidded to a stop before a featureless wall, then pressed her hand against it. With a pneumatic hiss, a hidden door slid open. "The Nexus Chamber," Krax said, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Of course." They plunged into the darkened room beyond. In its center, suspended in a column of crackling energy, floated a being of pure malevolence, the Overseer's true form. Foster raised his weapon, but before he could fire, an invisible force slammed into him. He felt his mind being invaded, crushed beneath the weight of an ancient alien consciousness. Through the haze of agony, he saw Thraxa stumble, clutching her head. Then miraculously, the pressure lessened. Foster looked up to see Zephyr materialize on Thraxa's shoulder, its tiny form trembling with exhaustion. Taking advantage of the distraction, Foster charged forward. He rammed the butt of his rifle into the energy field surrounding the Overseer. Sparks flew as the containment field collapsed. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the Overseer's essence surged outward like a tsunami of darkness. Foster was thrown back, his body slamming against the far wall. Through blurring vision, he watched in horror as the entity poured itself into Thraxa's convulsing form. When it was over, Thraxa stood motionless, her eyes now glowing with an otherworldly light. When she spoke, it was with a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of time itself. "Fools," the Overseer said through Thraxa's lips, "you cannot comprehend the scope of what is to come." With a gesture, a wave of psychokinetic energy tore through the chamber. Foster felt ribs crack as he was hurled once more into unyielding metal. Alarms blared throughout the ship as the pulse propagated outward, decimating the Allied fleet. Struggling to his feet, Foster faced the possessed form of Thraxa. Blood trickled from a gash above his eye as he stared down the being that now wore his ally's face. The Overseer's laughter filled the chamber. "Your primitive minds cannot grasp the truth. This world, this galaxy, all of it is but fuel for the great rebirth. And now, with this body's unique resonance, I shall shepherd that renewal personally. As the overseer spoke, holographic displays sprang to life around them. Foster watched in mounting dread as a complex process began, targeting the planet below. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The overseer was about to digitize and harvest an entire world's biosphere. Foster's hand tightened on his weapon. He knew what he had to do, but the thought of it made him sick. Could he really bring himself to kill Thraxa to stop the overseer? Before he could act, a familiar chittering filled his mind. Zephyr, barely conscious, crawled towards him. As their eyes met, Foster felt a sensation like an electric current passing between them. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. Foster's consciousness expanded, merging with Zephyr's in a fusion of human and uplifted minds. Together they became something greater than the sum of their parts, a gestalt entity with the moral core of humanity and the psychic might of Zephyr's kind. The overseer recoiled, sensing the threat, but it was too late. The combined will of Foster and Zephyr slammed into the overseer's defenses, overwhelming them in a storm of psychic energy. As the overseer was forced from Thraxa's body, Foster's Zephyr acted on instinct. They tore open a rift in the fabric of space-time itself, banishing the ancient entity to the furthest reaches of the cosmos. The backlash was immediate and devastating. Foster felt Zephyr's higher consciousness shatter, dissipating like mist in the morning sun. As the gestalt broke apart, he found himself once more alone in his own mind, cradling Zephyr's small, furry body. The ferret blinked up at him, its eyes now those of a normal animal. No trace remained of the incredible being it had once been. Foster's throat tightened as he stroked Zephyr's fur, understanding the magnitude of its sacrifice. Alarms still blared around them, but Foster barely noticed. He rose unsteadily, Zephyr secure in his arms, and turned to face what remained of his team. Talon was helping a dazed Thraxa to her feet, while Krax worked furiously at a console, trying to regain control of the ship. "It's over," Foster said, his voice hoarse. "The overseer is gone." But even as relief washed over him, Foster knew this victory was just the beginning. The overseer's words echoed in his mind. There were others of its kind out there, and a cycle of destruction that threatened all life in the galaxy. As the ship's systems came back online and damage reports flooded in, Foster steeled himself for the challenges ahead. They had won the day, but a far greater war loomed on the horizon, and humanity, he realized, would play a pivotal role in the battles to come. Foster's prediction proved grimly accurate. In the days following the overseer's defeat, reports flooded in from across known space. Worlds previously untouched by conflict now faced an existential threat. "We need a unified response," Foster said, addressing the hastily assembled War Council. Representatives from a dozen species crowded the room, their faces etched with worry. Chancellor Krax nodded. "Agreed. I propose we formalize our alliance into a permanent joint command structure." Thus, the Coalition of United Races was born. As the details were hammered out, Foster found his gaze drawn to Thraxa. The female Jem'Hadar stood apart from the others, her eyes haunted. Foster approached her. "Thraxa, I have a proposition for you." She turned, regarding him warily. "What is it, human?" "We need a public face for the Coalition, someone who truly understands what we're up against." Foster took a deep breath. "I think it should be you." Thraxa's eyes widened. "Me? But I was compromised. The overseer used me as a vessel." "Exactly," Foster said. "You've seen into its mind. You know its tactics, its motivations. That knowledge is invaluable." For a long moment, Thraxa was silent. Then, squaring her shoulders, she nodded. "Very well, I accept." As Thraxa took her place at the head of the council table, Foster felt a flicker of hope, but it was short-lived. "Incoming transmission," Talon called out. "It's Earth." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a face Foster hadn't seen in years. Commander John Bradford, his former XCOM mentor, looked older and more careworn than Foster remembered. "Jason," Bradford said, his voice grave, "we need to talk about Zephyr." Foster's hand instinctively went to his pocket, where the seemingly ordinary ferret now slept. "What about Zephyr?" Bradford's explanation hit Foster like a physical blow. Zephyr, a product of XCOM gene modding experiments, a being of immense psychic potential, now reduced to a normal animal. But fragments of that transcendent mind might still linger. We're detecting psionic disturbances across multiple systems, Bradford continued. Cults worshipping something they call the prophet rodent are springing up. If we don't contain this, Foster understood. The coalition, still in its infancy, couldn't afford such division. I'll handle it, he said. As the transmission ended, Foster turned to Dr. Talon. Pack your gear, Doc. We've got work to do. While Foster and Talon embarked on their quest to neutralize Zephyr's psychic remnants, Thraxa faced challenges of her own. The Coalition's war room buzzed with activity, but progress was maddeningly slow. The Klingons refused to commit additional ships without concessions, a harried aide reported. Thraxa's fist clenched. Don't they understand what's at stake? This isn't about political maneuvering. It's about survival. Before she could continue, alarms blared. On the main display, a Klingon battlecruiser opened fire on a Coalition outpost. What's happening? Thraxa demanded. Chancellor Krax's voice was grim. Sleeper agents. The Overseer's kind has been busy. Thraxa made a snap decision. Prep my shuttle. I'm going to handle this personally. Hours later, Thraxa stood face to face with the Klingon dissidents. Tension crackled in the air like static electricity. You dare betray the Coalition? Thraxa growled. The Klingon leader sneered. We bow to no one, Jem'Hadar, especially not to... His words were cut short as a disruptor blast seared the air where Thraxa's head had been a moment before. The room erupted into chaos. Thraxa moved with lethal grace, her combat training taking over. But she was outnumbered, and these were no ordinary opponents. As a blade whistled toward her throat, Thraxa braced for the end. It never came. The weapon stopped inches from her skin, held back by an unseen force. For a heartbeat, Thraxa felt a familiar presence. Zephyr. Brush against her mind. The fighting stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Klingons and Coalition forces alike lowered their weapons, looking dazed. In the stunned silence that followed, Thraxa saw her chance. She spoke of unity, of the threat they all faced. To her amazement, the Klingons listened. As Thraxa's shuttle docked with the Coalition flagship, she allowed herself a moment of relief. Crisis averted, but at what cost? Foster was waiting for her. One look at his face told Thraxa all she needed to know. How many? She asked. 17, Foster replied. All confirmed sleeper agents. We dealt with them. Thraxa nodded, her expression hardening. Good. We can't afford to take chances. As they walked toward the war room, neither spoke of the weight settling on their shoulders, the lines they'd crossed, the ones they knew they'd have to cross again. The real war, they both knew, had only just begun. Begun? In the days following their victory over the Overseer, the Coalition worked tirelessly to solidify their newfound alliance. Foster and his team had little time to rest, however, as reports of a new threat emerged from the depths of space. Incoming transmission from Gorn territory, Talon announced, her voice tight with concern. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a scene of carnage. Defenseless outposts lay in ruins, bodies of various species scattered among the wreckage. Foster's heart made as he watched Gorn warships systematically obliterate everything in their path. This can't be sanctioned by the hegemony, Krax growled. We have treaties. His words were cut short as the feed abruptly switched to a close-up of a Gorn face. Scales gleaming with malevolent intent, the creature's eyes burned with an all-too-familiar otherworldly light. Greetings, Coalition vermin, the Gorn hissed. I am General Slark. Your pathetic alliance's days are numbered. Before anyone could respond, the transmission cut out. Alarms blared throughout the command center as reports flooded in from across Coalition space. Multiple Gorn fleets detected, an aide called out. They're targeting civilian populations. Foster's mind raced. This was no random attack. It bore all the hallmarks of the Overseer's influence. But how had it spread so quickly? His thoughts were interrupted by a priority alert from Earth. Commander Bradford's face appeared on screen, his expression grim. "Jason, we have a situation," Bradford said without preamble. "XCOM's gene labs were hit. They're after Zephyr's regenerative matrix." Foster's blood ran cold. If the Overseer's agents got their hands on Zephyr's genetic template, they could create an army of psychically enhanced super soldiers. The implications were staggering. "I'm on my way," Foster said, already moving towards the hangar bay. Thraxa stepped forward. "I'll coordinate our fleet movements from here. We'll do what we can to slow the Gorn advance." As Foster's shuttle broke at atmosphere, he saw the devastation firsthand. Gorn ships swarmed Earth's orbital defenses, their weapons tearing through shields and armor alike. XCOM's subterranean complex had been breached, smoke billowing from multiple entry points. Foster hit the ground running, his rifle at the ready. He found Bradford coordinating a desperate defense outside the main gene lab. "They're after the pod," Bradford shouted over the din of battle. "We can't let them—" A massive explosion rocked the facility. As the dust settled, Foster saw a team of Gorn commandos emerge from the rubble, carrying a familiar-looking stasis unit. "No!" Foster roared, charging forward. But it was too late. The Gorn vanished in a shimmer of teleportation energy, leaving only destruction in their wake. Bradford grabbed Foster's arm. "We planted trackers on the pod. If we move fast, we might be able to—" Another explosion cut him off. This time, when the debris cleared, Foster found himself staring into the maw of a Gorn assault rifle. "How convenient," General Slark's voice purred from behind the commando squad. "The architect of our defeat, gift-wrapped and ready for interrogation." Foster felt a sharp pain in his neck, and the world went dark. When he awoke, he found himself strapped to a cold metal table, Bradford similarly restrained nearby. The room reeked of antiseptic and something else, the coppery tang of blood. Slark loomed over them, a cruel smile twisting his reptilian features. "Now then," he said, activating a device that crackled with energy. "Let's discuss the finer points of genetic manipulation, shall we?" As the torture began, Foster retreated into his mind, desperately searching for a way out. Little did he know, help would come from the most unexpected of places, and the tides of war were about to shift once again. Pain lanced through Foster's body as Slark's device crackled with energy. He gritted his teeth, refusing to give the Gorn the satisfaction of hearing him scream. Beside him, Bradford's face was a mask of relentless drive. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Slark hissed in frustration, deactivating the torture device. "It seems our time has been cut short," he snarled. "But don't worry, we'll continue this conversation soon enough." As the Gorn general stormed out, Foster heard the unmistakable sound of weapons fire. Moments later, the door burst open, revealing a squad of coalition troops led by Thraxa. "Cutting it a bit close, aren't you?" Foster managed a weak smile as Thraxa worked to free him from his restraints. "We can discuss timing later," she replied, her voice tense. "Right now, we need to move." As they made their way through the corridors, Foster's mind raced. The Gorn attack, Zephyr's genetic matrix, Earth's defenses in shambles. The situation was dire. But even as they fought their way to the extraction point, a plan began to form. Back aboard the Coalition flagship, Foster addressed the assembled leadership. "We can't win this war if we're constantly on the defensive," he said, his voice still hoarse from the ordeal. "We need to fortify our positions, build up our forces, and prepare for the next attack." Chancellor Krax nodded in agreement. "I'll divert resources to begin construction of shipyards and weapons foundries across Coalition space." "Good," Foster replied. "But we need more than just ships and guns. We need allies." It was then that an unexpected message came through. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Queen Karatha of the Klendathu. "Greetings, Coalition leaders," her voice resonated through the war room. "We have watched your struggle against this Overseer. The Klendathu stand ready to join your fight." Foster exchanged glances with Thraxa. The Klendathu were fearsome warriors. Their support could turn the tide of the war. But alliances were fragile things, especially in times of crisis. "We welcome your aid, Queen Karatha," Foster said carefully. "What do you propose?" The Klendathu Queen's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. My infantry legions are unmatched in ground combat. They are yours to command. But in return, I require something of you. Foster tensed, waiting for the other shoe to drop. My eldest son, Karim, possesses unique abilities, Karatha continued. I wish for him to be trained in the ways of psionics, to unlock his full potential. The implications were clear. They wanted to create a being capable of rivaling Zephyr's power. Foster's mind flashed to the ferret sacrifice, to the cult springing up across the galaxy. It was a dangerous gamble. I'll need to discuss this with my team, Foster said, buying time. As the transmission ended, the war room erupted into debate, but Foster's attention was drawn to a priority message from Earth. Commander Bradford's face appeared on a secondary screen, his expression grave. Jason, we've uncovered something, Bradford said without preamble. Project Safeguard. It was meant to protect Earth's population against psionic influence, but... Foster's blood ran cold as Bradford outlined the project's potential compromise. Sleeper agents, hidden in plain sight, ready to undermine everything they had fought for. As if on cue, another alert flashed across the main display. An investigative reporter named Yesha Dar had stumbled upon classified information about Project Safeguard. She was preparing to go public. Foster closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible decisions bearing down on him. The Klendathu's offer, Earth's vulnerability, the threat of public exposure, each problem demanded immediate attention, yet addressing one might mean neglecting the others. He opened his eyes, meeting Thraxa's gaze. She nodded, understanding without words. They had work to do. All right, Foster said, his voice cutting through the chaos of the war room. Let's get started. All right, Foster said, his voice cutting through the chaos of the war room. Let's get to work. He turned to address the assembled leaders, but before he could speak, alarms blared throughout the ship. The main view screen flickered to life, showing scenes of pandemonium across Earth's major cities. What in the name of... Chancellor Krax began, but his words were drowned out by the cacophony of screams and explosions emanating from the display. Foster's blood ran cold as he watched millions of civilians transform before his eyes. Bones cracked and reshaped, skin bubbled and warped, and inhuman cries filled the air. The once bustling metropolises devolved into battlegrounds as the mutated masses turned on their fellow citizens. It's Project Safeguard. Bradford's voice crackled over the comms, strained and filled with pain. The genome editing project, it was compromised. Yesha Dar's broadcast, it triggered the hidden protocol. Foster's mind raced. The reporter's expose, meant to uncover the truth, had instead unleashed a nightmare beyond imagination. Earth's greatest defense had become its ultimate downfall. We need to contain this, Thraxa growled, her eyes fixed on the scenes of carnage. If it spreads off-world... Her words were cut short as a new alert flashed across the screen. The Overseer's armada had entered Earth's orbit, drawn by the chaos like vultures to a carcass. Foster felt a familiar presence brush against his mind, a faint echo of Zephyr's consciousness. Without fully understanding why, he knew what he had to do. Thraxa, coordinate our fleet to hold off the Overseer's forces, he ordered. I'm heading planetside. There's something I need to find. Minutes later, Foster's shuttle pierced Earth's atmosphere, dodging debris and errant weapons fire. The psychic pull led him to a nondescript hillside outside what was once Washington, D.C. As he approached, the ground shifted, revealing a hidden entrance. Inside, he found Bradford slumped against a control panel, his body racked with pain. Jason, the commander gasped, you made it. Foster rushed to his side. What is this place? What's happening? Bradford's eyes were glassy, unfocused. Project Baleros, he wheezed. Our last hope. It can rewrite Earth's entire biosphere, make it incompatible with the Overseer's kind. But the cost... He didn't need to finish. Foster could see the price etched in every line of Bradford's face. Suddenly, the facility shook violently. Outside, the transformed hordes had discovered their location. Foster could hear them clawing at the entrance, their inhuman shrieks echoing through the corridors. There's no time, Bradford said, his voice growing weaker. You have to initiate the sequence. My genetic signature, it's the key. Foster's hands hovered over the controls, the weight of the decision crushing down on him. To save Earth, he would have to fundamentally change it forever. A burst of light filled the room as a psionic portal materialized. Thraxa stepped through, followed by a towering insectoid figure, Corim, the Klendathu prince. "We'll hold them off," Thraxa said, her voice grim. "Do what you have to do." As Thraxa and Corim moved to secure the entrance, Foster turned back to Bradford. The commander nodded weakly, a silent understanding passing between them. With trembling fingers, Foster began the sequence. Bradford's body arched in agony as his very essence was channeled into the machine. The air crackled with energy, and Foster felt the ground beneath his feet begin to shift. Outside, Corim unleashed a blinding wave of psionic energy, momentarily stunning the mutated horde. But even as he did so, antimatter bombs rained down from the Overseer's ships, pummeling the Earth's surface. Foster watched in awe as Corim's form began to glow, merging with the lingering essence of Zephyr. The fused entity turned to Foster, its voice a chorus of countless minds. "We will stabilize the process," it said, "but you must complete the transformation." As the world around him began to warp and change, Foster steeled himself for what came next. Earth would survive, but at a cost none of them could have imagined. The Belleros sequence reached its crescendo, and Foster felt his own humanity slipping away. He closed his eyes, embracing the change, knowing that in doing so, he might just save everything he had ever fought for.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.